For this, we're gonna need the factory radio, and really all we need it for is for these brackets off of here. Now, it does have a Phillips screw on it. However, good luck getting that off. I suggest using an 8mm. Now, the nice thing in this case is these are the fine threaded screws, which is what the Alpine is gonna need. And they are marked left and right. And we're done with this. Now for a kit, I like to use the Metra 958202. And using the term kit is kind of, well, it's not really accurate. All it is two little, what I call wings. It's these little guys here that finish off the radio. So what you do is you actually mount this onto your radio. So most radios have little nipples because there's little tiny nipples. You see them kind of sticking up there. And there should be nipples in this, but this doesn't have the nipples. So that means we're gonna have to sand these down. And you really only gotta worry about the front two because the rear two, well, they don't even go on the radio. Now on the kit, you'll notice this line right here. That's so that you can cut this other side off. So now they just stack on top of one another just like this. Kind of put one finger there to hold it in place. Now for putting these screws back in, of course you can use the Phillips side. It's just getting them out is the hard part. And that's basically it. So we have the radio mounted. Now what I like to do all the time, anytime I do a Toyota, is go ahead and test fit it, because what I've found is sometimes the depth is wrong. Don't just assume that since this was so fun and easy that it's gonna be magically in work. Test it. So one of the parts of the install we haven't spent any time talking about is the P310, other than to say we are putting one in. And I apologize for that, but we're pressed for time, and we thought talking about the amplifiers and stuff like that was a bit more important. But I will show you what we're doing real quick. So naturally he keeps a ton of stuff in the back of his car. So what we like to do when we put one of these in is we make this umbilical cord here. On the P300s, they have a main power, they have a bass knob, and then they have the RCA or line level input here. And we've made this one about 4 feet long so that if he decides to put the back seat in, which he probably never will, but if he does, it's there. And also he's got all this stuff, so if he needs to go on a trip and he needs to remove it all, this can come out if he needs to. On the end where this all plugs in, there's a row of dip switches across the top. The first one on the right says remote, DC offset, and audio. This has to do with the remote turn on. In this case, we are using an aftermarket radio, so we're going to leave it for remote. If you were going to do high level, you could do DC offset or audio. And what that'll do is use signal sense to turn on the unit. Next is your high level, low level switch. We're gonna be using RCAs, so that's low level. And then phase, 0 or 180 degrees. Now, we'll go ahead and plug in our power, our signal, and our bass knob. So these are easily removable if he needs to get them out. Along this side, you have your gain, your crossover point, which is 50 and 200. We're gonna set it to 80, and a bass boost if you feel you need it. Now this is just going to go here like this with the rest of his stuff. Now one other thing to mention about these Sequoias or their comparable pickup trucks is the floor sills, the things that go right here. They have screws that come out and then have to go back in, and it uses these little crappy things right here. The idea is as you put the screw in, it fattens these out and it locks them in place. The problem is they stay open like this, and then when you pull them out and try to put them back in, you're gonna break them. So what you want to do is grab yourself a pair of pliers or duckbill needle nose, whatever you got, and you want to take them, go about an 1/8 inch down from here, and just squeeze them. Okay, and squeeze them hard. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna push that plastic back together again so that it'll go back into place and you won't break these tabs off, because they're super easy to break off. And you want to do it on both the front and the rear. Now you can see much thinner together as opposed to wide like this. This is definitely just going to break one of them off. Now the bad thing is if you do break one of them off, it's tough because there's a hole underneath there. So then you got to fill the hole with something so you can screw it. It's a pain. Do that trick. Save yourself the headache. All right, so what we have left to do at this point is finish running the wire. For that, I have to get in the rest of the wiring for the radio. I've got my cool little knockout here that I'm going to put the USB in. Fernando's got a fuse holder he needs to mount. Let's go ahead and start working on this, and then we'll see where this goes. Now for the flush mount USB, we like to use the USB DMA1. And we like to refer to it as the nickel. So if you ever hear us say we need to put in a nickel, that's what we're talking about, because the head is about the size of a nickel. The hole on the back side, however, is exactly the size of this particular uni-bit, which is 3/4 of an inch. So what we want to do is drill this thing all the way through. Now looking at the back side of this has this centerpiece here and also some letters in there which indicate where the center is. So I'm going to take my awl and just push through, and that will mark the center for me. So now I can go ahead and drill my hole. Now I drilled all the way through, nice and easy. The other thing the nickel has is this little line right here. This is so that it can go in and it doesn't twist. So we need to go ahead and drill that into our piece. And for that, we'll just use a roto zip. And it's just a little notch, not much, not like a 1/16 of an inch. That's all it needs. Don't go crazy. Now the only other thing is this middle divider here that we used as a straight edge is kind of in the way. So we're gonna use our flush cutters to remove what's left of it. All right, so now we can go ahead and slide our little guy in, give it a push. Should hear a little snap like you heard, and there we go. Just follow along the main harness, come back and plug it in, and that's this all set, ready to go. Now, we also have to add in a USB for CarPlay Android Auto. So what we want to do now is there's two little spots right here. We want to just run our USB from the Alpine to that. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and put some loom over this so that it doesn't get cut up, just like the factory wiring has loom over it. Fernando's over here running the power wire. He's kind of in my way for what I need to do next, which is run the Bluetooth mic. So I thought I would go ahead and do some testing on the radio. One of those things is testing to make sure everything works. In this case, this does have a power antenna that goes up and down. I want to make sure that functions. When I plug in my radio, FM comes on, my power antenna doesn't go up. Now this didn't have a separate wire for the power antenna in it, so that's leading me to believe that there might be a wire that's not pinned in that harness there, which kind of sucks. So we'll go ahead and unplug our Alpine, and we'll go ahead and plug the factory back in to make sure that in fact the power antenna works first. Get it on. And our power antenna is coming up. So that's telling me that there's a different wire for the power antenna. So we have our digital multimeter. We've set it for DC, which is the line with the dots underneath it. We're gonna go ahead and put one probe to ground, which the chassis of the radio is a ground. And now what we want to do is figure out which one of these wires is turning on and off with the radio. Now this is the way our plug goes in. And the wire that they have pinned, which is the amplifier turn on, which we were hoping was also the power antenna, is on the other side, the car side, not this outside here, and it is pin 3. And there's nothing next to that, but there are two pins up here on the top that aren't going to anything in this harness. So we'll test the first one. And our voltage is nothing. Touch the second one, and we get 12 volts. Now we'll go ahead and turn off the radio, and we lose power, and the antenna goes down. So what that's telling me is that this blue striped wire, which I really can't tell what the first color is, it might be whitish, is going to be a power antenna. So what we want to do now is go ahead and unpin this blue white here that we have that would have been the amplifier turn on, but since we're not using it for amplifier turn on, we're going to go ahead and pull this out and move it up one into the power antenna location. So we have our fuse mount in. What we did is a basic S-bend onto the factory bolt. Real popular, makes the fuse holder, well, it mounts it in place. We got our red heat shrink on there, so it's very obvious that it's a power wire. And since he was out of my way, I was able to go ahead and get the RCA ran over, get the base knob mounted. Everything is in the dash now, so all we need to do is plug everything in. Yay. So let's hop in the car and do that. Alright, we got the radio in, we're testing all the speakers. You hear that popping sound, that means one thing, polarity test. Alright, I'd already done the other side before we started filming. We're all good to go, which means now, well, now we just gotta take a listen. The only crossovers we have to worry about are the ones in the radio. There's no gains to really worry about setting that much of because, well, on the P300, honestly, you should keep the gain turned all the way down. It's super sensitive. So even though this is just deck power, we want to make sure we set the high pass filters at the radio. Since these are the 7-inch and they're only using deck power and we want to get some decent front bass out of them, we've gone ahead and crossed them over at 60 Hertz at 18 dB. The rear 6.5, so we've moved that up a little bit. It's at, I'm settled on 100. The rear sub has a crossover on it, so we've just left that alone, let that be its own thing. Yeah, sounds good, not bad. Well, we hope you enjoyed this one, showing you how to bypass these little cool JBL amplifiers if you should ever run across something like this Sequoia or compatible pickup truck. You'll know what to do. Did you have fun?
Oh, I have a blast.
Well, end the show, please.
All right, on to the next one, guys.
There you go. See you guys later next time. Bye.